The invitation looked routine, but it was a trap. Elias Reed sat at his desk, reading the email for the third time. It came from a producer at the Daily Forum, one of the most watched news shows in the country. They wanted to feature him in an upcoming segment on diversity in tech. On paper, it sounded good, great even. A chance to talk about his company, his team, the hard work they'd done. But something didn't feel right. He'd seen this before. A black entrepreneur gets a moment in the spotlight, only for the narrative to twist, turning praise into questions and questions into doubt. Elias wasn't just any businessman. At 38, he had built CodeSpire from scratch. It started with late nights in his apartment, building cybersecurity tools no one believed in. Now, CodeSpire had landed a $150 million defense contract, beating out companies 10 times its size. This wasn't charity. It was skill, sweat, and years of grinding. Still, something about the invite made him pause. His assistant, Lena, leaned against the office doorway. She'd been with him since the early days, before the first office, before the first investor. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked. "These shows love to tell a success story, but they love tearing one down even more." Elias didn't answer right away. He knew she was right. The pattern was always the same. Smile for the cameras, then defend yourself when the questions start cutting deeper than they should. But then he stood up, rolling his shoulders like someone stepping into a ring. "If they want to play chess," he said, "let's play." He wasn't going on that stage to explain his worth. He was going to show them they'd picked the wrong man to doubt. The day of the interview, Elias arrived at the studio early. The building was bright on the outside, but felt cold the moment he stepped in. No one greeted him with warmth. A young woman with a headset handed him a visitor pass without looking up. "They'll mic you up in 5, she said, already walking away. No small talk, no prep questions. Just a quick powder in the makeup chair and a producer mumbling something about keeping answers tight. Elias could feel it already. This wasn't about a conversation. It was about control. In the corner of the green room, a TV screen showed the live broadcast. The segment before his was about a celebrity scandal. Loud voices, laughing, flashy headlines, then a quick cooking demo. Elias watched quietly. A new graphic flashed on screen. Up next, the black tech surge, talent or special treatment. That's when he knew exactly what this was. They didn't invite him to celebrate his win. They invited him to explain it. Like he had something to prove. Like his success needed to be double-checked. He didn't react, not on the outside. But inside, his jaw tightened. His company had outbid some of the biggest tech names in the world. That wasn't luck. It wasn't a handout. It was earned. And if this show planned to twist the story, they were in for a surprise. Elias didn't come to play defense. He came ready for the game. He straightened his jacket, stood tall, and waited for his name to be called. The cameras were already rolling when Elias stepped onto the set. The lights were bright, almost too bright, and the chairs were arranged to look like a casual talk between friends, but he knew better. Across from him sat Victoria Hayes, the lead host of the Daily Forum. She smiled as he sat down, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. She held a stack of cue cards in her lap, her fingers tapping lightly against them. Elias adjusted his suit jacket, staying calm. He'd done hard things before. This was just another one, on national TV. Victoria started smooth. She called him a self-made success, praised CodeSpire's latest government deal, and asked him how he did it. Elias kept his answer sharp but polite. He talked about the team, the long nights, and the technology they built. But he knew this wasn't the real interview yet. Then came the turn. Victoria flipped a card and looked back at him. "Some people say," she began, "that your company only got the contract because of government diversity programs." There it was. Elias didn't flinch. He let the question hang in the air for a second. He had heard this kind of thing before, just in quieter rooms. But now it was being said in front of cameras, to millions. He kept his voice calm. "It's funny," he said, "how when a black man succeeds, people ask what helped him. But when a company run by the same families for generations gets the same deal, no one asks anything." The crew behind the cameras went still. Victoria shifted slightly in her seat, keeping her polished smile. She was just getting started. So was he. Victoria didn't back off. Her tone stayed polite, but her words started cutting deeper. She brought up Elias's past, growing up in a low-income neighborhood, raised by a single mother, no Ivy League degree, no famous mentors. "So how," she asked, "does someone with no major connections beat out billion-dollar companies for government deals?" Elias could feel the setup. It wasn't curiosity, it was doubt. The question wasn't about his skills. It was about whether someone like him even belonged at that level. He leaned forward a little, calm and steady. "It's called work," he said. "Some people are born into opportunity. Others have to build it from nothing." He didn't raise his voice, but every word carried weight. He talked about working 3 jobs while finishing his degree, about sleeping in his office while building his first product. That was his advantage. Not legacy, not favors, just grind. Victoria nodded like she heard him, but her eyes told a different story. She wasn't finished yet. Then she brought up a bigger idea. "Maybe black entrepreneurs today actually have more advantages," she said. "Programs, grants, media attention. Some say the system is finally fair," she added. Elias gave a short laugh under his breath. "That's the thing," he said. "When we win, people ask what gave us a head start. But no one ever asks which golf buddy funded a white startup, or what backdoor got them into Stanford." The air shifted. Even behind the cameras, no one moved. This wasn't just an interview anymore. It was turning into something real. Victoria wasn't done. She shifted in her chair and tried to act casual, but Elias could tell something new was coming. She glanced at her cue cards one last time, then set them aside. This time, she didn't read from them. "Elias," she said, "don't you think some of this anger is a bit much? I mean, your story proves the system can work. Doesn't that show the gap isn't as wide as people claim?" It sounded calm on the surface, but the message was clear. If you made it, how bad can things really be? Elias didn't answer right away. He looked straight at her, then slowly shook his head. "That's the problem," he said. "People love using one success story to prove the system is fair. But if one person makes it out of a burning building, you don't say the fire wasn't real, you ask why so many others didn't make it." That line hit hard. Even Victoria went quiet. For the first time, she didn't have a follow-up ready. Elias kept going, his voice steady. "I didn't make it because the system helped me. I made it despite everything pushing against me." The silence after that was heavy. No one moved. No one coughed. Even the crew seemed frozen. It wasn't just a good soundbite, it was the truth, and it landed in a way no one expected. Victoria looked down at her hands, maybe thinking of something else to say. But it didn't matter. Elias had already shifted the power in the room. This wasn't her segment anymore. Victoria tried to pull the focus back. She smiled, but it was tight now, forced. Turning slightly toward the camera, she brought up something new, public perception. "Some people say that black entrepreneurs get more media attention than others," she said. "That your story is more popular because it's dramatic. That white business owners who work just as hard don't get the same spotlight." Elias let out a quiet chuckle. Not because it was funny, but because of how often he'd heard this twisted version of fairness. "So now we get too much attention?" he asked, looking directly at her. His tone was calm but firm. "In a world where most CEOs look nothing like me, where funding still mostly goes to the same group of people, you're telling me that I'm the one with the unfair advantage?" Victoria sat back, still smiling, but her hands were now locked, tightly together in her lap. Elias leaned forward just a little. "Let me ask you this," he continued. "If I wasn't really good at what I do you honestly think I'd be sitting in this chair right now?" Victoria opened her mouth, but he didn't give her the chance to cut in. "You think I got here because I checked a box?" he said. "Or maybe, just maybe, I'm sitting here because I worked harder than most people are willing to admit." The room went still again. The energy had shifted completely. It wasn't just about his story anymore. It was about every person who's had to carry double the weight just to be seen as equal. Victoria stayed quiet for a moment, but Elias knew she wasn't finished. She looked back at her notes, then carefully chose her next move. "Some might say," she began slowly, "that your frustration isn't really about race. That maybe it's more about feeling pushed out by bigger companies. That maybe it's just business." Elias sat back slightly, not angry, just tired. Tired of the same idea being dressed up in different words. He shook his head. "It's not about frustration," he said. "It's about honesty, about accountability. When I speak up, it's not because I'm bitter. It's because I've seen what's really happening." Victoria tried again. "But don't you think that in today's world, hard work is what really matters? That race doesn't play as big a role anymore?" Elias looked at her straight on. "People love that idea," he said, "that it's all about effort, that success is just waiting for whoever wants it bad enough. But that only sounds true if the system works for you." He didn't raise his voice, but his words hit hard. "Let's be real," he added. "Black entrepreneurs still get denied loans at double the rate. We still get a tiny piece of startup funding. And even after we prove ourselves, people still ask if we really earned it." You could hear how still the room had become. There were no more rehearsed smiles from Victoria, just silence. Elias leaned in one last time, calm but clear. "The only people who think the system is fair are the ones it was built for." That was the moment no one could ignore. Not anymore. The cameras finally cut, but the damage was already done. Elias didn't storm off or say anything dramatic. He just sat still for a moment, then stood up and walked out of the studio like nothing had happened. But everything had changed. Within an hour, clips from the interview were all over social media. People weren't just talking. They were arguing, sharing, quoting him word for word. He didn't yell. He didn't fold. He told the truth. That was one of the top comments. Another one said, "This man just said what nobody else was brave enough to say." Some people were inspired. Others were angry. The usual mix followed: support, criticism, praise, hate. Headlines started popping up. News shows replayed the moment he looked straight into the camera. Opinion pieces called him bold or bitter, depending on the writer. Some said he exposed the cracks in the system. Others accused him of playing the victim. But the clip didn't go away. It kept spreading. He'd touched a nerve, and not just online. Victoria, meanwhile, was in full damage control. On her show, the next day, she read from a statement. She said her job was to ask the tough questions and speak for the viewers. But it didn't matter. People had already made up their minds. Some saw her as a journalist doing her job. Others saw her as exactly the problem Elias was talking about. Either way, the spotlight had shifted, and now it was squarely on him. Elias sat in his office, looking out over the city. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing since the interview. Some messages were from strangers thanking him. Others were from people he hadn't heard from in years. And then there were the threats, the ugly side of saying something people don't want to hear. Investors were split. Some were pulling out, saying the spotlight was too risky. Others were suddenly very interested. Saying his name now meant something bigger. Lena walked in with a folder in her hands. "You just got an offer," she said. "A major network wants to do a full one-on-one special. No panel, no tricks. Just you." Elias didn't say anything right away. He looked at the folder but didn't reach for it. Part of him wanted to move on, to let the noise die down, go, back to running his company, stay out of the storm. But another part of him knew this wasn't just about him anymore. Something had cracked open. People were listening, even if some were listening just to argue. "They want you to tell your story," Lena said. Elias finally looked at her. "On my terms," he said. "No filters, no spin." She nodded. "That's what they said." He leaned back in his chair. This wasn't about chasing attention. This was about using it for something real.